So we move to our next speaker, and that is now we have online presentations from Dr. Eva Oberle. She is with us now. There was some glitch in connections. So she's an assistant professor with Human Early Learning Partnership in the Schools of Population and Public Health at the University of British Columbia. Her research investigates factors linked to positive child development and strategies for promoting mental health and well-being in the school context in particular. Her main focus is on social and emotional learning in schools, risk and resilience, and positive youth development. Eva's most recent publication is Early Adolescents' Emotional Well-Being in Classroom, the Role of Personal and Contextual Assets. And she will today be talking on probably the same topic. So over to Eva, please.
Good morning, everybody. Can everybody see my slides?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, great. So it's very nice to meet you all. My name is Dr. Eva Oberle. I'm an assistant professor with the Human Early Learning Partnership at the University of British Columbia. And I would like to first acknowledge that my work is taking place on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam people, because Canada is a place that is very much shaped by the colonial perspectives in research and also practice. This is really important for us to acknowledge the land that we work from, and this is Indigenous territory. This is just a quick overview of my team members, a large team, and I would particularly like to highlight Saima Kirai, who is a doctoral student of mine and who did a lot of her graduate training also at the Aga Khan University and has done some research with me in the context of Pakistan. Okay. So really, the work I'm talking about today is about the Middle Years Development Instrument. And the Middle Years Development Instrument is a self-report survey that is completed by children. And it was developed because we really realized if we want to understand positive youth development and understand how to promote well-being in childhood, we need to have data. So data are a catalyst for action, and what we don't assess is also really hard for us to address. The Middle Years Development Instrument really follows this idea that children grow up in different environmental contexts and niches. This ranges from the family to school, culture, peers, larger community, and the larger society and politics that children are placed in and grow up in a country. And all of this shapes their positive child development. And all of this is what we have to consider when we want to promote child development. So the MDI is one of the tools we have. Our monitoring system really ranges from early childhood to adolescence. This understanding of we need to track development over time to understand what are the best, most sensitive time periods to intervene and to really try and make a difference. Here's just a quick overview of the data we've collected over the last few years. It's something that is growing every year. This is just a couple of years old. So we just collected close to 30,000 data points this year again, self-report surveys with children in schools. And just to tell you a little bit about the survey, the MDI is completed by children in grades 4 to 8. It's a validated survey that measures positive youth development at a population level. The population level part is really important because if we want to change things in the population, we really need to have a big understanding of how children are doing, and that's a bit harder to do with small research studies. And the MDI was developed because we really wanted to understand positive youth development. A lot of the surveys are not strength-based. A lot of the surveys focus on the ill-being and on the risk children are experiencing, which is really important. But we said, well, if we want to promote something positive, we have to understand and also use positive indicators. So we really use indicators of social and emotional development, how connected do children feel to their peers, to their family members, connectedness to adults in school. Do children, for example, report that they have a close adult in school they can trust, someone who will help them if they have a problem? And we're not talking about academic issues here. We're talking about someone they can talk to in case they really need someone to trust. Here are some individual measures that we include on the MDI. Overall, we have over 100 items. on the MDI, and some of our well-being items, for example, are optimism, satisfaction with life, self-esteem. We do measure anxiety and depressive symptoms, and then we recode this into the absence of this. So we consider absence of the symptoms also an indicator of positive and development and resilience. I won't have time to go through all the measures, but our survey is online on the HELP website, something I'll look at. And then what we do is we partner with schools, and we report all the research that we do, or we report all the data we collect in schools back to schools. And for that, we need to package this in a bit of a more like knowledge to action project so that schools can use it. So we compile several measures, for example, into a well-being index so that we don't report back on individual measures only, but we also say, okay, overall, if kids are high on optimism, self-esteem, happiness, and low on sadness and high on general health, then we consider they're thriving. And then we tell children, we tell teachers and administrators in your school, compared to the overall district, compared to other measures in the province, this is how many kids are thriving. This is how many kids are medium to high in their well-being, and this is the number of kids you have, the percentage of kids you have in your school that are low on well-being. And that's really a good indicator for schools to know how their children are doing, and together with the other variables, they receive data on what are the areas in their schools to work on and maybe implement programs and interventions. We also have an assets index, assets being considered connectedness as assets that really support children because we've seen that connectedness is a key indicator that supports children's well-being, thriving. I'm not going to have the time to go through the index in detail, but again, there are documents and resources on our website that really explain what goes to the assets index and how it can be used. And I want to show you actually some trends over time. And it's been really hard to see that actually, especially in grade 7, we've seen a decline in well-being over the last few years. And this is beyond the COVID dip that everyone was expecting. But the decline actually has been starting before COVID started. And the decline is very specific to grade 7, not as much in grade 4. There's a bit of a dip in grade 4, which is probably due to COVID. But in grade 7, it seems like it's been really like mental well-being has been getting worse. There's some ideas that have been discussed. Some of it is the link to just like the constant social media and screen time. Over the last decade, it has increased much more with the uptake of everyone really owning a handheld device and cell phone and so on to always be plugged in. This actually coincides also with much less in-person socializing time, which is something that has been concerning as well. And what we've also seen is like an increase of or a decrease on other promoting health behaviors that are linked to well-being. For example, we've seen that children report also being less connected, feeling less connected to their peers. Rates have been a concern in the last few years, and of course, in society, in the global world in general, just the exposure to global concerns, climate change, war, and so on that we've been seeing. So this is some of the reasons we have to explain this, and it's quite consistent with all the measures we have for well-being in our survey. And because it's hard for us to directly address well-being, what's important is to put the well-being in relation to the assets. And what you see here is that the more assets children report, the higher is their well-being. And the assets is something we can directly work on in schools. Assets would be finding strategies and ways to promote positive youth development through the connectedness. And it can be programs, for example, to support a positive school climate, anti-bullying programs, interventions that really help teachers to connect with their students and to really get to know them well and to form positive relationships. This is a very Canada specific project or a BC specific project, and also like a British Columbia. But one of the limitations is that we have very little data like this, and also almost no large scale data in lower and middle income countries, including Pakistan. And that's why my PhD student Saima Karai has actually stepped forward and said, I want to do this. I want to work on this as my dissertation. And she has adapted the middle year development for the use in Pakistan. She did this over the past few years. And Okay, I'm going to skip this slide, the background slide. What she has done through multiple steps is she has worked with researchers at Aga Khan University and also leaders and leaders in the school district, the school, and with other community members in Pakistan to adapt the Middle East Development Survey. And what is important here is not just a literal translation, but also an adaptation for what does positive youth development really mean in the context of Pakistan. Maybe there's some other variables we need to measure. Um, for example, involvement in religious activities and religious communities is probably a much more important part of positive youth development than what we would see in Canada, British Columbia. So she has really done a great job on this. It took a long time to translate it, to adapt it. She has spent a lot of time with the children in schools, doing focus groups and trying to understand, are you understanding this item? Do you like this item? Do you think the item tells us something important about you? And some items she realized just don't work in the same way in Canada as they work in Pakistan. So she needed to adapt them and modify them so that they're meaningful for children, including the voice of children in that project. Um, and she recently actually just finished up a large-scale data collection. The data are still being entered, so I can't actually show you data on the actual packet. We call it the PMDI, the Pakistani MDI measure. I can show you a little bit here on some of the findings she had from her focus group and trying to understand out of school time. Out of school time is a really important indicator for positive youth development because these are the unstructured hours after school that can be used in many different ways that contribute to positive youth development. Some ways, of course, are involvement in school-related work, doing homework and so on. Some kids do tutoring, I think called tuition. Then there's madrasa that she found was a really common one children participate in. But she also found socioeconomic differences. She found that children, for example, in areas that are more wealthy, kids tend to do more in paid education programs. In rural areas, she found that kids often reported helping in domestic work, work at home, taking care of siblings, and so on. She also found gender differences. So Salima has shown us that there's a big difference in who gets to play outside and go outside of the home and into the community. Boys are much more likely to be allowed to do this, whereas girls are much more in home-based activities and more indoors. This is likely related to safety issues and gender norms. So really, for us, this is really important to understand how, if we take the MDI, which is a measure that has worked really well to promote positive youth development in Canada, when we take this outside of the Canadian context into another context, how can we adapt it? And also, how can we maybe decolonize it? Because we have to acknowledge that the perspective we bring from a tool built by a group of people that predominantly Western backgrounds is also carries a colonial perspective that we need to take into account when we take it somewhere else. Okay, so there are obviously limitations and there are challenges Salima encountered. And really, I think the big takeaways where we really need to have in Pakistan the partnerships, we need to have appropriate tools to measure and to collect data, because really only if we want to support positive well-being, we can only support positive well-being if we have data on positive well-being, and that data is currently not there yet. So a lot of the measures, of course, in low and middle income countries focus on reducing child mortality, ending certain illnesses and diseases, finding vaccinations, scaling out vaccinations, building an infrastructure to end things that are challenging in society. And she really took this perspective saying, no, we also have to have a strength-based tool that measures positive things we want to promote, and we can promote through schools because almost all children attend school. So if we have, we found this with MDI, we have a good system that reaches all children in schools, teachers, and if we report that data back to teachers and train teachers based on it, that's a really effective way to support positive youth development. And really, the main strategy we have to support positive youth development is collaborative action. It takes a village, of course, to raise children. So we need the partnerships with schools, communities, government, organizations, and so on. We need specific resources. And this here is, again, something you can find on the HELP website, the Discover MDI. It's a field guide to promoting well-being in middle childhood activities. It has preset slide sets for positive development, for promotion that can be shared with teachers and other stakeholders in school districts. It's really important to provide these resources. We now are building a dashboard, an online dashboard for users, for knowledge users to interact with their data and to be able to actually look at their data in subgroups and understand how are kids doing in different neighborhoods as well. What about gender differences and what about other subgroup analyses? Yeah, so the strategy focus on positive relationships, nurturing those with peers and adults in schools and communities. Social emotional learning is now in British Columbia. It's a part of the curriculum. We now specifically address social emotional learning in schools as much as we address academic learning. It's an important part of supporting health and well-being, and specifically mental well-being in society. And this is at the policy level here. I showed you the Bronfenbrenner model earlier. Like, this outer part is really the policy. How can we change policy to create systemic change? To create systemic change, we really have to bring mental health and well-being into the school policy and school strategy. This begins with leadership. Also, of course, the way resources are allocated. We need some capacity building if we want to support this in schools. This is a snapshot just of the curriculum that shows you that as part of personal social competencies that are taught in schools, this is how the different MDI measures here map into this curriculum, and that's why the MDI can also be used as a form of assessment for how kids are doing in school. Okay, thank you very much. And I have my email address here. I know that it was a bit harder virtually to interact, but feel free to email me. I also have the different links here to the Discover MDI and the help website in general, and you're welcome to reach out. Thank you.